Mesothelioma is one of the most insidious dangers associated with asbestos. Appearing up to 50 years after asbestos exposure, mesothelioma is an incurable cancer, and very few people who contract the disease live for more than 5 years after diagnosis. In almost all cases, mesothelioma affects people who were exposed to asbestos in the past. Mesothelioma is considered a relatively rare form of cancer. However, because few doctors were familiar with the disease, and because many of its symptoms can be mistaken for signs of other diseases, it is believed that mesothelioma has been significantly underreported as a cause of death. Mesothelioma. The mesothelium is the tissue that lines parts of the body cavity. Mesothelial cells also cover the outer surface of most internal organs and protect them by producing a lubricant that allows organs to move around. The mesothelium of the chest is the pleura, that of the abdomen is the peritoneum, and that of the area around the heart is the pericardium. Mesothelioma is a cancer in which cells of the mesothelium become abnormal and divide without control or order. The cancer cells can invade and damage nearby tissues and organs. They can also metastasize to other parts of the body. Most cases of mesothelioma begin in the pleura or peritoneum. Rarely, they begin in the pericardium. Regardless of the location, mesotheliomas are divided into three main types. Epithelioid, which comprises 50% to 70% of all cases, has the best prognosis. Sarcomatoid comprise 7% to 20% of all mesotheliomas. The mixed biphasic type makes up the remaining 20 to 35%. Over 40 years ago, researchers identified a link between occupational quercetolite asbestos exposure in South African miners and the development of mesothelioma 30 to 40 years later. Between 70% and 90% of patients who develop mesothelioma have been exposed to asbestos, often through work, and cases tend to be clustered near shipyards and plants that produce asbestos products. In the past several decades, mesothelioma mortality has risen by 5% to 10% per year in most industrialized countries. This trend has been attributed to the increased use of asbestos in shipbuilding, manufacturing, and construction from World War II onwards. Because of the long latency period before mesothelioma manifests, the benefits of removing asbestos from people's home and work environments and establishing health and safety regulations governing the use of asbestos may not be seen for at least another decade. Deaths due to mesothelioma were expected to rise in Western Europe and the U.S. at least until 2020. Unregulated use of asbestos in other parts of the world may cause the epidemic to continue even longer in those regions. In the U.S., between 2,000 and 3,000 new cases of mesothelioma are diagnosed each year. More men are diagnosed with mesothelioma than women, although the gap between men and women is closing. The rate of female patients with mesothelioma has remained relatively steady, while men's rates have dropped. It is thought that this discrepancy is due to fewer men being exposed to asbestos at work since health and safety regulations have been enacted in what have often been male-dominated occupations, such as construction, railroad work, and shipbuilding. Before regulations regarding asbestos were put into place, workers often brought home asbestos on their clothing, exposing their family members to the fibers as well. Also, people who live or work near asbestos-related operations can be exposed to asbestos that is released into the environment. Naturally, occurring asbestos can also be found in dust and rocks in certain areas. A 2005 study found that living close to such an area significantly increases the risk of developing mesothelioma. As with other cancers, the risk of developing mesothelioma increases with age, with the average age of mesothelioma patients around 60 years, but it can strike at any age. The risk of developing mesothelioma increases as the duration and intensity of asbestos exposure increases. People exposed at younger ages are at higher lifetime risk of contracting the disease because they have more years in which the disease can develop. Studies have shown that approximately 6% of asbestos workers over the age of 35 die of mesothelioma. Researchers have also found that insulation workers, who are often exposed to asbestos, are 344 times more likely to die from mesothelioma than the general population. Asbestos. Although people often refer to asbestos as though it were a specific mineral, it is actually a commercial name given to a group of naturally occurring silicate mineral fibers. What sets these fibers apart from others are the following characteristics. They occur in bundles that can easily be separated from each other or split into thinner fibers. They have high tensile strength. They are flexible enough to be spun into threads and woven into cloth. They are resistant to fire, heat, and chemicals, and they do not conduct electricity. Since asbestos fibers are very fine, if they are inhaled, they can make their way into the smallest passageways of the lung where they cannot be coughed out. When asbestos fibers contaminate food or water and are swallowed, some of the fibers can stick in the digestive system. Once the fibers are inhaled or ingested, the body's defenses try to break them down and remove them. But if that is unsuccessful, the fibers can cause inflammation, scarring, and cancer. In addition, the lymphatic system can carry the fibers to other parts of the body where they can do more damage. Asbestos occurs in two main forms: serpentine, which has curly fibers, and amphiboles, which have straight, needle-like fibers. There is one kind of serpentine fiber, chrysotile, and 5 kinds of amphibole fibers: anthophyllite asbestos, gunnerite asbestos, rebeccaite asbestos, tremolite asbestos, and actinolite asbestos. The vast majority of asbestos produced worldwide today is chrysotile. Amphiboles, particularly chrysotile, are often considered to be the most carcinogenic. However, chrysotile fibers are also associated with mesothelioma. In fact, some studies indicate that chrysotile asbestos is as dangerous as amphibole asbestos. Between 1900 and 2003, the U.S. produced about 3.29 million metric tons of asbestos and used approximately 31.5 million metric tons. The first asbestos mines in the U.S. began operating in the 1890s. The last asbestos mine in the U.S. was closed in 2002. Because of its many useful properties and because it was relatively inexpensive to mine and use, asbestos was commonly used in building materials such as insulation, cement, vinyl floor tile, popcorn ceilings, caulking, roofing shingles, and joint compound. Asbestos was also used in brake linings, high-temperature gaskets, and textiles. By the 1970s, however, the links between asbestos and diseases such as mesothelioma were too numerous to ignore. Eventually, new uses of asbestos were banned in the U.S. and safety and health regulations regarding the handling of asbestos were enacted. Unfortunately, for many people, those regulations came too late. It is estimated that from 1940 to 1980, approximately 27.5 million workers in the U.S. were exposed to asbestos at work. And according to the Environmental Protection Agency, over 700,000 schools and public buildings in the U.S. may still contain asbestos insulation. Thank you for watching. This video was produced by Asbestos.Net, a leading resource on all aspects of asbestos and mesothelioma. Our priority is to inform victims about the devastating effects of asbestos exposure, mesothelioma, asbestos cancer, asbestosis, and other asbestos-related diseases, and to advise them with a wealth of information. Individuals whose lives have been touched by mesothelioma have numerous questions and concerns. Their caregivers and family members also need accurate, reliable information. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with mesothelioma or asbestos cancer and need more information, we invite you to visit and explore the thousands of pages of oncologist-reviewed material on Asbestos.net, to call our convenient toll-free number shown below and speak with a mesothelioma specialist, or to use the simple contact form found at Asbestos.net to request a free copy of our informative books, custom inserts, and DVD. Asbestos.net. Information and help for patients and families.